Emergency blockade of Russia's energy hubs. This is Putin's fiasco and a lightning triumph for the Ukrainian armed forces. Pokrovsk has turned into hell for the Russians. The meat assaults have revealed cards no one knew about. Putin's head on the chopping block. Unexpectedly, Poland has become the supply point for the front. The Kremlin is hitting the SOS button. Troops are being assembled on high alert. Czechia has outplayed Russia. Europe has finally struck. All this in our episode Hell Point. Kremlin ambitions are turning to ashes. Every strike by the Ukrainian armed forces literally paralyzes Russia. This is being talked about for the first time. Ukraine is grabbing Putin by the throat. The energy war is sparking with revenge. Prime targets are already in the sights of Ukrainian defenders. Panic and fear among Russians is just the beginning. The shutdown of the Kremlin's military machine, now that's a real catastrophe. It's creeping closer and closer to Russia. Life on pause, blackout in Moscow. A clear signal things will only get worse. The Ukrainian armed forces have lifted the curtain on what awaits the enemy as soon as tomorrow. You need to hear this.
More and more Russian cities are plunging into darkness. If the Russians attack Ukraine's energy system, Ukraine will attack Russia's. The Ukrainian authorities warned about this, and the defense forces have demonstrated it clearly. This is what the Voronezh thermal power plant looks like now, for example. It was attacked on November 9th. They say there were at least 3 hits. After the explosions, part of the city was left without electricity. Voronezh.
This is such a serious bridge. They work in the military, including electronics. There are aviation enterprises, military enterprises, and public enterprises.
And this is exactly the difference between Russian and Ukrainian strikes on the power system. In addition to a deserved response, the goal of Ukrainian defenders is to plunge into darkness those energy infrastructure facilities that support the operation of the Russian defense industry.
A dual purpose, so to speak, if you will. To show Russia that not only can they do it, but we can also respond in kind to certain things. And truly try to bring to a halt their machine and undermine the military-industrial complex that is actively working against us in this war.
I think this trend will continue, that is, at first glance following the principle of pecking at the liver. Russian energy systems will gradually have various elements of their infrastructure knocked out, so at first glance it will just look like that. Well, it's nice that somewhere in Belgorod or Voronezh people were left without power, but let's think about it. In some ways, the configuration of the Russian energy system might be similar to ours, in the sense that power supplied through the same power lines can go not only, say, to residential areas, but also, for example, to industrial facilities and railway transport.
That's why all such attacks are not random. The goal is not just to respond, but to respond painfully, so that the facilities supplying power to the military industrial enterprises of the aggressor country cannot fuel the Kremlin's ambitions.
When various elements of the integrity of the Russian energy system are gradually bitten off like this, it primarily means that somewhere a train carrying something the Russians need for the war will stop, or there will be a blackout schedule at a factory. That produces things necessary for the Russians for the war, and
not all such enterprises are deep in the rear, experts say. Many facilities are located close to the Ukrainian border. For example, strategic bombers Tu-95MS are repaired in Taganrog, and one of the manufacturers of components for the Russian missile program, specifically solid fuel for Iskanders, is located just 150 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. It is indeed possible to plunge them into electrical darkness. There are undoubtedly such important facilities for the Russian military-industrial complex in the Moscow region as well. But why stop at Moscow?
I think the psychological effect of plunging Moscow into darkness would be much more effective than just hitting a few factories there, because it's precisely this main mass, what do you call them? The office plankton, who live off the regions. Finally, it will dawn on them that something is happening and that something needs to be done.
In this way, Ukraine will kill not 2 but 3 birds with 1 stone at once. A just response is the paralysis of Russian military-industrial complex facilities and psychological pressure on the Kremlin. Sounds like the perfect target for the next blackout.
The Russians are urgently advancing on Pokrovsk. Putin's army has received a new order. The dictator's soldiers are seeping in like rats. Our forces are meeting the enemy not with bread and salt, but with a barrage of fire. The confrontation of the year, Donbass groans. The Russian army can barely keep up with this pace of war. Fake victories served up with a side of lies. This battle for Pokrovsk has torn off all the masks. What shocking truth became known to Russians during this decisive moment? Of the so-called special military operation, and what will it mean for them? We'll tell you about it in just a moment.
Pokrovsk is on the brink. Fighting there is non-stop, and the Russians are shelling the city with every weapon they have.
Ukraine's defense forces are holding on to a high-rise residential district. It is precisely the use of these high-rise buildings that gives Ukraine's defense forces an advantage, allowing them to significantly improve their tactical positions. Moreover, the intensity of strikes on the positions of Ukraine's defense forces in the Pokrovsk direction using guided bombs reaches 200 to 300 per day. In addition, the occupiers' tactics involve so-called combined attacks. That is, they use both guided bombs and accordingly heavy flamethrower systems.
It is reported that the defense forces managed to break the enemy's encirclement in the area of the Pokrovsk pocket, which allowed Ukrainian defenders
At the moment, Ukraine's defense forces are conducting stabilization operations to prevent further advances by Russian occupation troops.
Syrskyi notes that Russia has deployed 150,000 troops and plans to encircle Pokrovsk and neighboring cities.
In parallel with Pokrovsk, the occupiers are sharply intensifying combat operations in the Lyman direction. There, enemy groupings number around 90,000 personnel. So, as we can see, they are simultaneously trying to attack in several directions at once with a specific goal. Accordingly, the goal is to capture the territories of Donetsk region that are controlled by Ukraine's defense forces.
But how many Russians will die for these cities? The bunker grandpa doesn't really care, but a Russian blogger still decided to talk about it.
And so, for the sake of two small towns, Russia has already killed 80 to 100,000 of its own soldiers. Russia killed them. Not Ukrainians killed them, Russia killed them.
But of course, what's the big deal about those 100,000 people, right? Putin surely knows what he's doing, doesn't he? Or does he just not care at all? In
Germany, during the period when it was actively capturing and occupying Norway, France, and Poland, actually lost fewer people in total than Russia has lost for these two relatively small towns. This comparison highlights the significant difference in casualty.
The commander-in-chief of the armed forces reported that Russia is preparing a final maneuver with the aim of capturing the entire Donetsk region.
They plan, after possibly capturing Pokrovsk, to transfer all operational reserves. Let me emphasize again, that's about 170,000 troops, to seize the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. This is what the Russian military command is planning. So both the fighting in Pokrovsk and accordingly, from there, the immediate objective of the Russian occupation army is to take control of districts in the Donetsk region.
Meanwhile, Z channels are publishing videos of Russian troops entering Pokrovsk. Strangely enough, after 4 years of war, they are thanking the fog. But just as they entered, they perished. It seems the fog is not a very reliable ally. Ukrainian soldiers are not giving up an inch to the Russians and are eliminating them one by one.
The settlement has been completely cleared, and considering its strategic importance, it's a key logistical component of the route that passes through this settlement. It is now under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. The armed forces of Ukraine are conducting successful counter-offensive actions in the area of the settlement of Shafov.
Later, precisely because of this, Russia began a mass recruitment of volunteers to guard important facilities from drones. But we know very well where these volunteers will end up before long.
In fact, a covert mobilization is underway in the Russian Federation.
Right now, Poland is making a strong move. The Kremlin is shocked by this. Warsaw is mobilizing its forces and supplying weapons to the armed forces of Ukraine with renewed vigor. Our ally is reaching the highest level of support. Armored vehicles are going straight from the factories to the front lines. Artillery is being loaded right on the way. Helicopters and fighter jets are taking direct aim at destroying the enemy. You have to see this. Columns of equipment are on standby. Ukraine will receive massive reinforcements. Russia is about to get a response it will remember for a long time. With every new batch of weapons, the Kremlin nervously gasps for air. Will Poland pull the final lever that will crush Moscow? We'll find out in just a moment.
Over 120 billion zlotys, or $4 billion. That's the significant amount Poland has spent since the start of the full-scale invasion on aid to Ukraine. This includes both humanitarian and military support.
Poland was one of the first countries to provide Ukraine with tanks, ammunition, and defense equipment on a large scale. In 2022 to 2023, it delivered, among other things, over 300 tanks, as well as armored personnel carriers, artillery systems, air defense systems, drones, mortars, assault rifles, and more than 100 million rounds of ammunition. 10 airplanes and helicopters were also sent to Ukraine. Between 2022 and 2024, Poland provided Ukraine with 47 military aid packages. The value of the equipment delivered in 2022 alone amounted to 7.23 billion zlotys, and in 2023 to 2024, another 5.63 billion. Poland also supplied more than 19,500 Starlink terminals, providing the Ukrainian armed forces with stable satellite communication. This accounted for almost half of all terminals used in Ukraine by the end of 2023.
Poland's assistance to Ukraine is not the result of some romantic infatuation, but is very pragmatic. Our neighbors understand that if Ukraine falls, Poland will be next.
After all, a fighting Ukraine gives Europe time to better prepare for threats. This time is needed, and we have no right to waste a single minute. Every minute counts. We will be held accountable for every minute.
318 tanks were transferred to Kyiv by Warsaw. Among them are modernized T-71s, M1Rs, PT-91s, and Leopard 2S. This is more than anyone else has provided. The total value of the free aid, including training, logistics, repairs, and medical support up to March of this year, exceeded $4 billion. In particular, in 2022, it amounted to $1.6 billion, and in 2023 to 2024, it was $1.3 billion. Poland also provided
Poland's military assistance: 586 armored vehicles, 137 artillery systems, 10 MiG-24 helicopters, 10 MiG-29 fighter jets, 287 man-portable air defense systems, 44 air-to-air missiles, over 100 units of small arms, 89 mortars, 4 Grad multiple launch rocket systems, and more than 100 million rounds of ammunition.
In addition to free aid, in just 2022 to 2023, Ukraine purchased weapons from Poland worth more than 2.2 billion euros. The largest contract was the agreement for 56 Krab self-propelled howitzers, of which 36 have already been delivered. The countries are establishing joint production of weapons and equipment. The parties have agreed on the joint production of 125mm tank ammunition. There are also plans for joint production of other weapons and military equipment, including the placement of Polish companies' manufacturing facilities in Ukraine.
It is necessary to mobilize the industry. Polish and Ukrainian industries should make joint investments not only during the war, but also to develop their deterrence potential. These initiatives are very much needed. It is also very important for us to improve economic relations. We support Ukraine.
Poland has become the main hub for supplying weapons to Ukraine. Also, during the war, more than 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers have undergone training on the territory of the country. With each year of the war, the assistance and joint cooperation between Poland and Ukraine only grows stronger.
We
voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
The Kremlin is in panic. The Russian army is falling apart at the seams. The losses are enormous. The front is collapsing. The generals are silent and Putin is shouting in frustration. The dictator is making a desperate move, a new mobilization. Fear grips all of Russia. Families are weeping while Moscow talks about patriotism. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces are holding the line and turning the front into a real hell for the enemy. Putin is throwing everything he has left into the fight, but every new recruit of his is just another number in the grim casualty statistics. Russia is burning because of its own decisions. Could this wave of mobilizations be the last for the empire of lies? Don't miss the shocking details coming up in just a moment.
A large number of occupiers are being eliminated by the Ukrainian armed forces in Pokrovsk and in Rodinska, a key settlement that supports the entire Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration from the east. Ukrainian tank crews have crushed the Russian invaders to rubble.
Similar reports from Pokrovsk, the hottest spot in Donbass, are heard almost every day. October has already become the bloodiest month for the Russian group throughout the entire war. However, it seems that November will break even this record. As a result of the colossal efforts of the Ukrainian defense forces, Russia has suffered record losses, and as a consequence, a new wave of mobilization. For now, it remains hidden. This term should be understood to mean several things. It includes recruiting conscripts for contracts as well as enlisting reservists to guard important facilities which the Russians have announced in many regions. This is a sign that the current flow of contract soldiers in Russia has decreased. The recruitment of foreigners also does not compensate for the losses in battle. According to Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation, Pokrovsk has become the site of incredible Russian losses. According to reports from Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky, in their attempt to occupy this city, more than 30,000 occupiers have already lost their lives, and their number is growing every day.
The fact that Pokrovsk has become yet another graveyard for Russian occupiers is undeniable. And in general, no one is hiding that. Thank you. The concept, not the strategy, of Ukraine's defense forces is to maximize. The objective is to deplete as thoroughly as possible the enemy's offensive potential, to inflict the maximum possible damage so that they do not have the strength to continue and expand their offensive. This is to ensure that these infiltrations do not, under any circumstances, turn into breakthroughs of our defensive lines.
As always, the Kremlin decided to solve the issue through deception. Officially, they are not announcing mobilization, but in reality, they are rounding up literally everyone the security forces and the military can get their hands on.
What characterizes this draft? Hellish raids that ignore all deferments, all supporting documents, basically anything at all. And these hellish raids are happening not only in Moscow, but now also in the regions. There are already reports of raids in Kazan and Khabarovsk. This is alarming, this is bad, because it's one thing if it were just in Moscow and Makhachkala, but it's another matter entirely if it's happening in cities with millions of people. This means that now they will simply cover the entire territory as much as they can with police, who will be catching all men of conscription age wherever they find them.
At the same time, the rule that used to apply, that conscripts do not fight at the front, is now a thing of the past. Currently, the year-round draft provides the army with a constant influx of people. First and foremost for recruitment. By the way, everywhere.
They can apply significant pressure to this new recruit and thus compel him to sign a contract. And then he is no longer a conscript but a contract soldier. And as a contract soldier, as is well known, under Russian law, you can be sent directly to the front line.
Russian human rights activists say that the methods in Russia haven't changed, but the scale of such contract signings has increased once again. If before these were still local initiatives, now the order has come from above, to forcibly keep as many people in the army as possible.
This hidden mobilization continues. It hasn't just started. I repeat, it hasn't ended either. It's been going on since the fall of 2022. This is just its new phase.
Another method invented by the Russian military machine is to call up reservists to guard strategic facilities. Analysts explain that the scheme is designed for the gradual deployment to the front of everyone who has ever had any connection to the army. To start with, these reservists will replace the current convoys whose fate is already...
The word predetermined means that something has already been decided or set before anything actually happens. For example, if the outcome of a game is predetermined, it means the winner was chosen in advance, and nothing that happens during the game can change that result. This means there is no room for chance or uncertainty because everything has been arranged ahead of time.
After a few rotations, those same reservists will be sent to the front, and if there's time, they'll undergo a field military training. If Russian losses do not decrease, the briefing will take place right on the bus, on the way to the war. Putin needs an uninterrupted supply of cannon fodder.
The enemy has thrown literally everything they have at Pokrovsk. But they continue to suffer such losses there that even their numerical advantage in some areas doesn't help. Up to 20 times, it still doesn't allow them to take control of the city.
Europe can no longer wait. Poland, Lithuania, Germany, and the Czech Republic are all together building a defensive barrier with the latest technologies, radars, and drones. A sky shield is being formed over Ukraine, turning Russian Shahids into a pile of scrap metal even before they cross the border. Western partners are working around the clock. Weapon convoys move non-stop, warehouses are buzzing with equipment, and factories are running 3 shifts. Moscow is nervous, the Kremlin is in a panic, but it's already too late. Europe has awakened, and Ukraine is pointing the way that will bring Russia to its knees. What spectacular operations this alliance is planning to carry out? Find out in the following report.
After a series of Russian drone incursions into the airspace of European countries, it became clear that the old air defense systems can no longer cope. These cheap drones, flying in swarms, break through conventional defense schemes and deplete stocks of expensive missiles and combat aircraft. This very challenge became the impetus for the European Union's ambitious drone wall initiative. Practically,
all countries are involved without exception. Whether it's Eastern, Northern, or Western Europe, every region has encountered manifestations of this new type of hybrid action by the Russian Federation in the sky, violations of airspace. And the need to respond is already a fact.
the idea is to create a unified defense system along the eastern border of the EU, where sensors, radars, satellites, interceptors, and artificial intelligence will be able to detect, classify, and neutralize threats in real time.
We need to create a European system that will allow Europe to develop advanced drone solutions, inspired by what is already being done in Ukraine.
It is Ukraine that plays a key role in this development. 4 years of war have made Ukrainian experience critically valuable. Here, tactics are tested, technologies are refined, and production chains for combat and counter-drone systems are formed. In combat conditions, not on a training ground.
Now, drones have changed absolutely everything. And the best drone experts in the world are Ukrainians. I saw a video of a situation where a swarm of drones retreats from a single soldier. Even a single drone can lure a soldier into a trap while another attacks him from the other side. So we are already seeing how drones are becoming increasingly deadly. This will change the way wars are fought in every country. And it's not just drones, but also how to protect your roads, how to protect your airports, how to prevent drones from invading your territory. That's why Europe must quickly learn from Ukrainians how to defend its skies.
Ukraine offers not only experience but also an industrial base. Local manufacturers such as TechX can supply equipment, train operators, share combat experience, and standardize solutions to meet Europe's needs. The integration of Ukrainian technologies and expertise will make it possible to create adaptive, fast, and cost-effective systems capable of operating in real combat time. Funding is already being processed through the SAFE instrument and the EU defense budget, which provides sufficient authorization. 100 billion euros for the eastern flank. The drone wall plan includes 3 directions: aerial, land, and maritime lines of defense, which must be integrated into a single system. It is enough to control the airspace from the Baltic to the Black Sea.
According to the information and the news we read from different countries, self-determination is currently at the stage of finding or forming a consensus among the internal situations in each individual country, requiring possible changes in legislation and how this will later be addressed at the collective level. That is, in order to reach a common level, a unified position among the countries of the European Union and NATO, it is necessary to first achieve this within each country, understanding that in some places this will require changes in legislation, while elsewhere it will require more thorough explanations to society so that actions are clear, there is support and there is understanding, which is important for countries with democracy, where there is a constant electoral process and where any step can be used by the opposition.
This project is part of a larger strategy called SHIP 2030. These are 4 initiatives aimed at strengthening the EU's external corridors and protecting against drones, to create a joint air defense system and even provide space services for military needs. The main goal is to deter Russia and Belarus, especially considering that by 2030 the capabilities of the Russian armed forces may increase. The plan is to strengthen the eastern border by the end of 2026 and by 2027 to deploy a drone defense wall. At the same time, the EU is creating an integrated air defense system. Space-based intelligence, communication and navigation services will support defense tasks. However, experts warn that bureaucracy and slow processes in Europe could delay the project. But if Europe can quickly establish this cooperation, the Shield 2030 could become a new line of defense that will protect not only EU countries, but also Ukraine. Now,
Ukraine is saying farewell to its space guardian. The SIG 230 satellite has completed its mission and left orbit. Space does not tolerate emptiness. The Czech Republic is already preparing a mega gift. Wow, this new satellite will open up a whole new level of possibilities for Ukraine. This is not just equipment, these are eyes that will see beyond the horizon. The Russian Federation is closely watching the developments. The enemy has no trump cards in this game. What Europe is talking about right now and what will mark the revival of Ukrainian space, all this in our report in just a few seconds.
Satellite for Ukraine? On October 21, 2025, the Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced that it would donate an Earth observation satellite to Ukraine as a sign of support. This information appeared in October when the last Ukrainian
January 2nd, 30.
SIG 230 fell and probably burned up in the atmosphere on October 8th off the coast of Alaska, USA. This was reported by the National Center for Space Control and Testing. Now he needed it.
And finished satellites. But let's not forget about essential Starlink equipment and access to data from the satellites of Ukraine's partners, primarily, of course, the United States.
Which specific satellite the Czech Republic will give to Ukraine is still unknown. The previous one was launched into its designated orbit by a Falcon 9 rocket from SpaceX on January 13, 2022. After that, it was contacted and it was confirmed that the onboard equipment was functioning properly. At the time, the President's office stated that the digital images transmitted by the satellite to Earth could be used in agriculture and forestry, cartography for water resource management, monitoring emergencies and natural disasters, as well as in the field of security and defense for detecting illegal activities.
There are several important roles and tasks that are carried out during wartime. First and foremost, of course, is intelligence gathering. Communication on the battlefield is also extremely important. And in fact, the appearance of Starlink systems in Ukraine for the first time gave a significant advantage at the beginning of the full-scale invasion.
Despite the fact that the Russians have let their satellite industry decline in their own country, it used to be at a high level, and now this is helping the Kremlin wage war against our
in this country. As we know, it is important to note country.
We can say that the Ukrainian satellite industry is currently in its infancy. With the support of our allies, it has every chance to become promising and competitive in the world.
That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo. Even more scorching news in our next broadcast. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you.